A mother's intuition. Giving birth to a child is known as one of the happiest moments of a woman's life, and such was the case with Mercedes Casanellas. In 2015, Casanellas and her husband Richard Cushworth welcomed a baby boy into their lives after years and years of struggles. While the couple was living a peaceful and stable life at the time of their son's birth, it had not always been so. In fact, you will be shocked and inspired by the couple's hardships and journey through the years. Both Mercedes and Richard had experienced a lot of struggles in their life. Richard, for one, had battled substance abuse for about 20 years. This included a deep reliance on alcohol, cocaine and heroin. This was the lowest point of his life. But thankfully, he was able to turn things around when he joined a rehab program called Teen Challenge. The program had a particularly Christian focus, which influenced all of Richard's life later and changed it for the better. After touching his Christian roots, Richard had a great affiliation with them, which is why he joined the Bible school at Christ for the Nations Institute in Dallas. It was here that he met the woman he would later spend all of his life with. Mercedes herself was attending the institute as a foreign student. The couple married in 2015 and travelled to Mercedes' native land, El Salvador, to work as missionaries. This is where things were supposed to get better for them and start looking up. But sadly, it wasn't so. Whilst living in El Salvador and finally starting their married life together, the couple were looking forward to the good days ahead of them. But it was one tragedy after another for the couple. While in El Salvador, the apartment Richard rented back in Dallas caught fire. This resulted in Richard losing all his worldly possessions, but this wasn't the worst of it. On one hand, while Richard was upset over the loss of all his valuables, Mercedes was attacked by a gang member not soon after. After being attacked by a gang and threatened with guns was when Richard and Mercedes decided to move back to Dallas. In Dallas, they settled and started making a life for themselves. Very soon, the couple was expecting their first child. Mercedes and Richard were beyond excited for the birth of their child. Near to the child's birth, Mercedes travelled back to her home in El Salvador to welcome her son in one of the best private health facilities in the city. Mercedes gave birth to a baby boy, and after going through an emergency cesarean, it was the most special moment of her life when she was given her baby boy to hold. She named the baby boy Jacob right there. She gazed at Jacob's face and was in awe of how much he resembled his father. But it was soon time to return the child to the nursery, so Mercedes kissed his forehead and sent him off with the nurse. Little did she know it would be the last time she would see him for a long time. The next day, Jacob was returned to her mother, and 4 days later they were both reunited with Richard, who had flown from Texas to meet his family. He was overjoyed to see his son and wife. He immediately fell in love with his little bundle of joy, and his happiness knew no bounds. The trio stayed in El Salvador for over 3 months before returning to their hometown in Dallas. Jacob was the brightest light in his father's life. But even though the mother had bonded with her son, there was a niggling worry in the back of her mind. While she loved and cared for the baby boy, there was this worry that the boy looked nothing like the child she had held in her arms right after the birth. Jacob didn't resemble her or her father. This made her feel disturbed for a long time. While she felt the same in the hospital when seeing Jacob the second time. She mentioned it to the hospital staff and they completely glossed over her worries. They told her that the child she had been given was most definitely hers. To further ease her worries, the medical professions told her that the memories of looking at Jacob for the first time weren't reliable because of the heavy medication she had been on at that moment. She had little choice but to believe them. Later, she mentioned her worries to many friends, but everyone assured her that it was definitely her baby, and that babies keep growing into their features for months after they are born. With all these assurances, Mercedes had no choice but to accept that she was needlessly worrying. But she would soon find out she shouldn't have been so complacent. Months had passed, and every day there was this worry that Jacob looked nothing like her child. She couldn't mention this worry to her husband, who doted on the little boy. It didn't help that despite her confusion, she loved Jacob. Giving in to her confusion, Mercedes took matters into her own hands and secretly took a DNA test to solve the issue for once and for all. What she found out through the DNA test shocked her to the core. When the DNA test came back, Mercedes discovered, to her absolute shock, that there was absolutely no genetic link between her and Jacob. Even though she had her doubts, she had desperately wished she would be wrong. It was a huge blow to her that she had been fearing from the start was true. This broke her down completely. Because if Jacob was not her baby, if he wasn't the child she had given birth to, then where was her child? Where was the child who had looked just like Richard, the one she had loved from the first moment she had laid eyes on him? And what would she do about the child she had bonded with, the child who she and her husband had raised and loved as their own? It was in this broken state that Richard had found the love of his life. Richard had no idea what was happening and why his wife was so distraught. He consoled her without knowing what the matter was, but a feeling of dread in the pit of his stomach. For a long while, Mercedes could not find the words to explain to Richard what she had found out about their son. When she finally mustered the courage and explained all the events to Richard, he was mute from shock. He could not believe his child was out there somewhere and that he didn't even know where he was. It was a bigger shock to Richard than it was to Mercedes, for he had never doubted for one moment that Jacob was his son. And when Mercedes had her doubts about Jacob, Richard had never second-guessed anything and fully loved the child from the moment he had seen him. What the couple then did to find their real child was nothing short of extraordinary. The couple was in severe distress over this knowledge. They kept thinking about their real son, and whose whereabouts they had no idea about. They were worried about his safety and security. Was he all right? Was he being loved? Will they ever see him again? But amid these questions was a growing worry. What would happen with Jacob, whom they now loved? Mercedes couldn't bear to part with this child who she had nurtured and cared for since the day she left the hospital with. She couldn't imagine a future where she would have to live without Jacob. But Richard was the first person to realise hoping for both the children was but a pipe dream. Eventually they would have to choose which child they wanted to keep. What decision do you think the couple made? After a lot of tears and denial, the couple looked for their real son, knowing full well that Jacob would have to leave their family of 3. They contacted the hospital in El Salvador and they immediately set to finding their actual child. The moment when Richard and Mercedes got the call that their son had been found, they rushed to get him. It was all such a whirlwind. One minute they were holding their Jacob, the son they had raised and loved for months, and the next, they weren't. Instead, they were holding the little boy who so resembled Richard. They barely got to say goodbye to Jacob, who had been a part of their little family. But while they both mourned the loss of the child they had grown to love, they were overjoyed at finding their own child safe and healthy. It felt as if both the babies had finally found their correct places, and they fit right in with their family. Being Christian to the core, the husband and wife named their son Moses, after the prophet who had similarly been missing for 3 months. But was this the end of it all? Apparently, just finding their baby boy was the easy part of the procedure. After finding their son, the couple had to figure out a lot of stuff, like starting with birth certificates. This was a lengthy and costly procedure. Richard, who was a native to the UK, turned to the British Embassy for help, and the ambassador, Bernhardt Garside, helped the couple obtain everything they needed. The El Salvadorian system was working against them and adding to the poor couple's worries. But thanks to the ambassador, who felt like a godsend to the couple, the whole process was resolved after a time. Though the couple had lost most of their savings, they had gained their baby boy back. After all they had faced throughout their lives, to Mercedes and Richard, it was finally a happy ever after. And it was all thanks to a mother's intuition. A mother's love defies all odds, even unbelievable mix-ups. If you like this incredible tale of a mother's love that defied all odds, hit the like button. For more unbelievable real-life stories, subscribe to our channel.